Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have the Disciples of the Red Angel World Eaters versus the Aeldari. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
Alright, and so for today, I have 2,000 points of Ulthway Aeldari. First, my Warlord, which is a Farseer Skyrunner, has Guide, Doom, and Fateful Divergence given by the Relic, which is, whatchamacallit, Ghost of this word. Ghost of that, 9+ Psychic Power can't be denied, and I get 1 from the Rune of Fortune. I chose the one that can give me what was it? Yeah, the extra spell, which will gain a command point. And as far as a relic, I can keep 1 extra fate die. So just a buffer character. As for troops, 2 guardians with weapon platforms, shuriken cannons scattered throughout, as well as a unit of rangers. Then other HQ, I have Avatar of Cain. I have 1 more, but I'll get to him because he's in reserves. So then I have a unit of D cannons for support, a unit of Warlock Skyrunners. These guys have Enhance and Drain, and Quicken and Restrain, which I figure is good against a heavy melee army and stuff like that. The overall idea of my army is to shoot them to death and keep running circles around them. And for some extra punch, I have a Fire Prism, and for some tricky shenanigans, I have Warp Spiders. And the Warp Spiders, Exarch just has Web of Deceit, which allows me to basically do a little bit of a deep strike. Then for my reserves, I have Karandras, the Phoenix Lord. Very powerful, very hopefully useful. Also, apparently, he has the same thing Gaskell and the Nightbringer have, where he can only take a certain amount of wounds per turn, which is 3. So he can survive 2 turns of completely getting beaten to the ground, or he'll die in 2 turns. And I have 2 units of Swooping Hawks. Each of them their Exarch has the Winged Evasion, so -1 to be shot at, just in case. Then I have 2 units of Striking Scorpions to support Canandras. And the, they have each of the Exarchs has Crushing Blows, and the Scorpion's Claw, which is a Power Fist with no negatives. And that is 2,000 points of Ulthway, on the dot, by the way.
Alright you guys, so my army is pretty straightforward. I'm playing Disciples of the Red Angels, and I know you can mix Khorne Demons, but I didn't feel like dealing with 2 books this time. I just want to kind of give it a go with what's in the book. So that is what you see here. So, my lord, I guess he's actually not my warlord, but my HQ, because I still needed an HQ. So I have the World Eaters on Juggernaut, World Eaters Lord, and he has the relic, the Skull of Anne Grant, which basically means that I select a visible enemy unit, and I can reroll wound rolls against that enemy unit. Yes. I think it only counts for him. It's kind of unclear. But anyway, I have 3 units of Exalted 8-bound. I have a Mauler Fiend, a Forge Fiend, and I have Angron this time. I think he works in both detachments. I think you can play him in both, but I think you have to have him in this one. And so there he is. You'll notice it's not the actual model. Neither are the Exalted 8-bound, but that is because the models don't exist on TTS just yet. But anyway, so there's Angron. He can't really hide, even though he's fully enclosed by a building. The rules, he's just there. So we'll see what that does for him. Yeah, and then I have 3 units of 8-bound in reserves. Now, the great thing about 8-bound, not the Exalted 8-bound, but the regular 8-bound, is that they can actually come in from strategic reserves in turn 1. So that's pretty cool, because I think it's a blood center, so I don't know what it is. So that's really cool. And yeah, obviously Angron is my warlord, because he has to be. I don't know what his warlord trait is, actually. I don't think he has one. Oh, he does. Anyway, it's not important. But anyway, So yeah, so that is 2,000 points of World Eaters. It's a basic repetitive list. I put some demon engines in here just because I need a little something, and so I thought those might be it. And we'll see how Angron does. I liked the 8-bound the last time I played, an Exalted 8-bound, so hopefully they'll actually get to do something this game. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Alright, so for secondaries, for the Eldar, scout the enemy. It's possibly, it could be good. I didn't fully build my army to be able to do it, but it's possible that if it looks like I need to play for points, I can do this. Behind enemy lines, I have a lot of deep strike, it's obvious. No prisoners. The max points I could possibly get if I slaughter all his human infantry is 9 points. And I figured that was far more likely than grind them down. Yeah, to the two choices. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. What's about yours?
Well, so I have the 3 World Eaters ones. They worked out so well for me last time. Figured I'd do it again. So basically, I get points for killing enemy monster character vehicles. That's 2 points. And then 1 victory point, and I think it's in melee.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then 1 point for other units that are destroyed by melee attacks with a maximum of 4 per round. Then Blood Gods do if any unit dies on an objective, which is what I didn't realize last game. But if anything dies on an objective, I get a point. Now it has to be different objectives. I assume that means there's a max of however many objectives are on the field per turn. And then pile the skulls, so basically 1 to 3 blood tithe points, 2 points per to a max of 5. Now last game I put points into this as soon as I could, and ended up not buying anything with my blood tithe points, so I might try it a little differently this game and maybe just keep some aside for the end of the game. I do not know. We will see. But yeah, so those are my secondaries. They did me really well last game. We'll see what happens this game.
Alright, when it came to deployment, Eldar won the role, so I made my opponent deploy first. Essentially what my ideas were is, I had no ideas. So he has only 1 ranged unit that can shoot. It's fairly short range. It's 36 inches, that's still quite a bit of a distance. So in my mind I was like, you know what, I feel pretty decent about my shooting. I could probably just go take the board. I'll try to evenly distribute, and then I'll place my heavy hitters where my opponent puts his strength. However, after I did that, I realized that I don't have any heavy hitters. They're all in deep strike. I have the avatar, and I don't really have anything that I can really buff or anything like that. And so I'm actually not in the best of situations right now. And I took a look, and so if my opponent, a 6-inch charge is very easy to do. My opponent basically has, I can only move forward like 5 or 6 inches from my deployment zone, and then my opponent can very likely charge it on the first turn. So, I mean, taking that into account, I'm playing really cagey, trying to just spread a small circle, and I'm trying to counter what my opponent does, but it really depends on my deep strikes and my opponent's move, and so I just deployed my units in such a way that I could counter what he did, very cagey. The Fire Prism's the only thing that has a unique spot. It was placed very relatively towards the beginning because I wanted it to have access to all the major sight lanes. From where it is, it can go straight down the board in shooting, can shoot to where Angron is walking, and can shoot pretty much everywhere on the major sight lines. And that's about it. So that's what was going on in my mind for deployment.
Yeah, so I don't have too much going on in my mind. Basically, for the back objective, I had my only shooty unit back there. That's, I mean, natural. It's a natural thought. And then I had my 2 kind of other big guys on the flanks. So Angron on the left, my Forge Fiend or Mauler Fiend, who is this? Mauler Fiend on the right, and then they were literally just, each one has their own little buddy Exalted 8-bounds. And then I decided to put my World Eater's Lord on the right side. Well, I guess it's your left side. Over there, because he can give a move buff to core units. Not that there are any currently on the map. but he could do it if he wanted to. Anyway, and then my 3 units of 8-bound are actually in strategic reserves, and they can come in on the first turn. So it's basically, if he gets the first turn, it'll just save them from getting shot or potentially getting shot, and then they can come out pretty far down the board. But yeah, my army can move pretty far, and they hit really hard. So there's no specific plan for my deployment, because I literally just run forward and kill stuff is the plan. So it doesn't necessarily matter too much to me where they went. And so yeah, that was my deployment.
All right, who goes first? Who goes second? Why don't you start this one off? Because I started the last video.
Okay, well, I think that is a good question. What do I think? I think I would rather go second.
Makes
for
sense.
the most part. Yeah, if you move forward, it just helps me be a little closer to you. But going first, I don't know if that's too bad of a deal for me either. At least for Angron, it'd allow him to kind of get out there a little bit, and allow me to kind of move up the board without anything having been shot, and maybe move them into maybe better spots or something. Yes, I don't know if it matters too much for me, but I think I'm leaning towards going second, just because it'll give me an easier time to fight things.
Well, as far as me, I want to go second because it'll give me the perfect chance to do one good turn of just shooting you to death, because all your guys will be moving up. Even if you move strategically, I'll be able to do good line of sight kind of stuff. And as well as if you have turn 1 deep strikes. If you deep strike turn 1, all you can really hit our deep strike is maybe over here a little bit, and the Avatar is there. Good luck killing him with your 8-bound. And as well as apart from that, just the way the battlefield is, if I go second, it'll be more to my advantage. I'll be able to maneuver and pick you off much better. If I go first, I'm going to have to basically play cagey, barely do anything, just tippy toes on objectives in some cases, and just try to survive. Just prepare. Basically, first turn would be just me setting up a defense. If I go second, I would just be killing you left and right, or doing as much damage as I can, and preparing for your deep strikes and stuff like that. But apart from that, that's pretty much how it is. I think I'd want to go second. So, all right then. Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
Well, I got my wish. Well, wait.
Sort of. Alright, I guess it's World Eater's turn 1.
Alright, World Eater's turn 1.
Let's see how we go. Alright, you guys, so essentially almost everything ran. Almost. So Angron went first, and he just has a 16-inch move, so he just straight up flew across the table, and he's within a 9-inch bubble on his guys over there, so that's pretty cool. Then I went over to the Forge Fiend in the middle, and he just basically poked out to see stuff to kill. And then I went over to the right side, so my Lord on Juggernaut basically tucked himself kind of around these buildings on the side. Then my Exalted 8-bound, the purple ones, moved. They ran towards the objective on the middle left. And then my Forge Fiend moved and secured the objective, or Mauler Fiend, whoever he is. I think he's a Mauler Fiend. And then I went over to my white Exalted 8-bound, and they ran as well, so they were able to go and sit on that objective, as were the yellow Exalted 8-bound. So then everyone had moved. So then I went to the strategic reserves. So my regular 8-bound came in. My blue guys came on the bottom left corner. So they're threatening both the ranger and the avatar. So I don't know what I'm going to do with them just yet, but they're there. Then my green 8-bound, no, the red ones came in next. They came in within 9 inches of the warp spiders, and the green ones came in within 9 inches of his guardians, the green ones in the middle there. And so, yeah, everything is on the table now, and we'll see what happens. This could be quite an interesting and extremely aggressive turn for everyone involved. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, my Forge Fiend shot at his D cannons, and they killed one of them. So he used a Fate Dice to, 4 wounds went through. He used a Fate Dice to secure one of those saves because he needed 6s. Then he rolled the others, and all 3 went through, killing off 1 D cannon, so that's nice. And then that is literally the only set of guns I have in the entire army. My Lord on Juggernaut has a pistol, and that is it. So, yep, that was my shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so in my charge phase, hint, hint, almost everything failed. So I started with Angron, and he charged just the Guardians, and he failed. And then I used command points to re-roll it, and he failed even worse. So then I had my red 8-bound charge his warp spiders, and he used his flicker jump to fall back. So then they tried to charge the Guardians, and they failed. Then my green 8-bound in the middle tried to charge his green Guardians. He overwatched. I took 1 whole wound, and then they failed to charge. And then my blue 8-bound charged his Rangers, and they actually got in on exactly a 9. So the least relevant charge in the entire game was successful. And everything that was so much more important was not. And so we will see what that means for me in the next round. Alright, you guys, so I started with my 8-bound champ, and he wiped the squad. He had 6 attacks, and they 1 missed the hit, but then they all wounded, and they were AP3 at 3 damage. So he didn't have a save, so the Rangers just died. And that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so for my turn, because Angron is actually touching one of his objectives, I actually got overrun the 2 points there, because they're one of the objectives in his territory, and Blood for the Blood God, because 1 unit died by melee attacks, which was the Rangers. And so I just, I got 1 point there. So not a great first turn. I have a Blood Tithe point, so I could have done Pile the Skulls, but because it's literally only 1 point, it didn't quite seem worth it to do that, so I'm just going to hold on to it and hope that helps me later on. And that was the turn, and those are my points.
Alright, so for movement phase, there's nothing in the command phase. Now, movement phase, however, this is actually a difficult chess game because of his huge high mobility. I can assume some units are going to die next turn. So my overall goal is to start just pushing him back, killing as much as I can, as fast as I can, what is likely, and setting my units in just a location where I expect them to die, bait out my enemy, and that, if they get charged, they die, and where my opponent can then run too. And that's sort of the idea I'm placing. On the left side, not a big deal. On the right side, I'm trying to maintain line of sights of weapons and stuff while trying to make sure that my guys can still effectively do something. Minimize losses. I'm trying to minimize my losses right now and trying to outplay. This is super aggression. Goodness. I can see why Angron was winning tournaments in this stuff. Alright, so for the psychic phase, first I started with the Warlocks, and they're just going to just rain on these 8-bound spray, the green squad in the middle. So the Warlocks cast Restrain on them, which reduces their movement by half, and it went off. Then they cast Drain, which forces them to have -1 to hit in melee until the next psychic phase, and that went off. Then the Farseer casted Doom on Angron, which allows me to have reroll wounds on him. Unfortunately, I moved my Farseer too far, and he was 19 inches away. The spell is 18. So I spent a CP to reroll it, because if it's a 10 or more, I get to make it a 24-inch range. And I did. And so I was able to doom Angron, luckily. And then I cast Guide on the Guardians, which gives them a reroll to hit. And it went off successfully. And yeah. Oh, unfortunately I had my Warlocks ran a Perils, and so it took 2 mortal wounds. And that was my Psychic phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, I started with the Fire Prism firing right into Angron. And so essentially I spent my 2 Fate dies for hit to make his heavy strong weapon auto hit. And then I use... and then because he was doomed, I could re-roll the wound. And both his shots wounded. My opponent saved 1. Then I rolled 3d3 damage for the shot that got through. And I did like 7 damage, and then I spent a CP to reroll it, and it did 8 damage, bringing him down to 10 wounds. Then my Warp Spiders mag dumped him, and because he was doomed, he got to reroll to wound, and then brought him down a few more, like 3 wounds. Then the Guardians fired at him, and they had reroll to hit, and they brought him all the way down to 2 wounds. And then the heavy weapons platform with 2 damage fired at him, did 2 wounds. My opponent saved 1, failed 1. Angron was dead. Then he spent his CP to reroll it and made his save. And Angron lives with just 2 wounds. So he's heavily bracketed. Thank God he's not going to be at his full strength of attacks for the rest of the game. But he's still there, and he's still a big threat. Unfortunately, literally no one else was within range to try to spit on Angron and knock him over. Alright, then I went to the Avatar of Cain. The Avatar of Cain fired his shot at the Mauler Fiend, rolled a 2, but that hit. I spent my Fate die to make his shot, which was basically a Melta wound. It wounded, and then my opponent saved it with a 5-up in wall. Then I had my D cannons fire at him. Did 4 shots, 3 hits, 3 wounds, and my opponent failed 3 saves. I rolled 2d6, got an 8, plus 2 because of D cannons. Each shot does 2 extra damage, and killed it with 14 damage. It exploded. Well, no, it didn't explode. It died. It didn't explode. And yeah, and that was my shooting phase. Oh wait, no. And then my Green Guardian squad fired at the blue 8-bound on the left. Did 1 wound. 1 wound. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, charge phase. I used my last Fate dice, which was on a charge, to make him have a 6, which automatically made it in, but I rolled the other dice, and I got a 5, so I had an 11. And so I was heavily muling over, if I went to the right, I would be safe from counter charges from his Lord Discordant and maybe the 8-bound, but I'd be open to shooting. And then if I went to the left side, I'd be safer from shooting, but easily open to getting a charge by his World Leader's Lord. So then I chose to be behind them, so I'm safer from shooting because of cover, and safer from charges. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Alright, Avatar swings. I use his regular swing, which is like a Power Fist and a Melta mixed together. 7 attacks, 2 missed. I used a CP to reroll 1. I rolled to wound. 1 failed there, so he had like 5 wounds. He rolled. He needed 4 ups for his invuln save. Failed every single one. And they're just dead because it's D6 plus 2, so automatically 3. And that was the fight phase. Alright, first turn. I do not have any of his back objectives, so no overrun. Scout the enemy. I lost my Rangers unit, and I don't have any spare units. Everyone had to contribute. Behind enemy lines. My reserves have not come in. No prisoners. I got 9 blood points or whatever, kill points. So it's still not even 1 point. We're getting there. A better first turn than I expected, but I should have taken grind them down. Doggone it, I would have won that. Dang it. Alright, this game's now make or break. Let's see what happens.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, I don't actually know where I start. I'll probably start with the left side. So my blue 8-bound moved through the wall towards his D cannons. My Lord on Juggernaut also ran, because he's pretty far from everything, back down that way, basically leaving the Avatar alone, because I don't really need to deal with that. My Forge Fiend moved around a little bit, as did my white and yellow exalted 8-bounds. The yellow basically moved farther away from the avatar, but still on the objective. And the white ones basically started to move down the board. The green 8-bound moved their half movement towards all the guardians. And then my red 8-bound moved towards his warp spiders, as did Angron just move that way. Towards his guardians, I guess. And that was my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, my Forge Fiend was shooting at his avatar. 2 of the autocannon shots went off, and so, or well, 3 of them did. He saved 1, 2 of them went through. Then he used a command point to try and save 1 more, but he failed.
It was a 3-up, come on.
Yeah. So 2 of those went through, so he took 4 damage from that, and then with the plasma cannon, 1 wound went through, but he saved that one, so that was the shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so my charge phase, I started with my blue 8-bound on the bottom left corner. Because they were behind a wall, he couldn't shoot them with Overwatch. I think technically he might have been able to, because D-cannons can target units not visible to the bearer, but honestly, I don't think it would have done anything for him except use a command point. I guess that's exactly what it would have done. But anyway, so they got in. They rolled like a 10. They needed like a 4. And then I charged with my green guys. They just barely missed it, and I didn't feel like using a command point on them because Angron needs to get in, mostly because I just want to roll a whole bunch of dice and him just wipe a unit off the table, but also so he can avoid being shot to death. And then, but I didn't charge with him next. So anyway, so the green guys failed in the middle. Then the red squad charged his warp spiders, but he used his flicker jump so they could move 6 inches, but it wasn't actually far enough. So I went from needing a 1 on the charge to a 3 on the charge. So they got in quite easily. And then Angron charged, and he actually rolled a 12. But he overwatched. And so he had 6 wounds go through, I think, or 5 wounds, with the Guardian Shuriken weapons. And so he took 1 from there. I saved 1, and sorry, let me reiterate. 3 of them were rolled 6s to wounds, so they were a different AP. And so the other 3, I saved 2 of them, and 1 failed. I let that one slide, and then I actually saved all of the other higher AP ones. And then his Shuriken cannon, so he's down to 1 wound. His Shuriken cannon shot, and 1 wound went through. And so I actually failed that save, but I used a command point because I only needed a 3, and I rolled exactly a 3, which was super. Anyway, but so I got the saves, and then he got in. And so this charge phase or fight phase stuff is actually going to happen, which is nice. So yeah. Alright, you guys, so combat phase I started and basically just worked my way across because he couldn't interrupt. So I started with the blue 8-bound, and the champion did 9 damage. So he killed 1 of the D cannons and did 3 damage to the other, and then the other 8-bound finished it quite easily. Because they have AP3, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's really nice, but it's ridiculous. And then obviously they consolidated into the Guardians, hopefully not to be shot to death later by whatever he has left. Then Angron swung with his triple attack, so he had 24 attacks just by, well actually 25, because he actually has the Relentless Rage rule, so he gained an additional attack and an additional strength, but that wasn't relevant. So anyway, so he had 25 attacks, he swung and he wiped out the squad. I think 15 went through or something. No, that's too low.
I didn't even count.
Well,
I didn't bother.
Yeah, honestly, my rolls are garbage anyway. But anyway, so the Guardians got evaporated by Blood and Fury, and then he consolidated into the Farseer. And don't forget, he has that rule where you can't fall back within 6 inches of him, so she is stuck. And then my red 8-bound swung, and so my champion with his heavy chain glaive swung, and I didn't realize it doubled his attacks, because that's pretty cool. It's a single damage though, so. But with Aeldari, that works. He swung, he wiped out the warp spiders. I think he ended up doing like 6 or 7 that went through or something, but because it was AP3, They just didn't get a save. And then they consolidated into the fire prism. Then he started swinging back, so he started the same way. He went with the guardians. They had one wound go through, but I saved it. Or did I?
Yeah,
Yes,
you
I
saved
did.
it.
And the fire prism swung, and he actually had one wound go through, and I failed it. So he actually nicked one of my guys. He stubbed his toe. And then the Farseer swung on Angron, hit, wounded, but I saved it because I needed a 2-up. So he needed 2s to hit, 2s to wound, and then I needed a 2 to save. So just a whole bunch of 2-ups going around. And that was the fight phase. All right, you guys. So for this turn, I had control 2, control 3, and control more. So I was able to get the full round of primaries. Overrun because I left all of my objectives, and were they green? The green 8-bound are tying his guardians for that objective. I actually don't control any in his territory, so I didn't get any points for overrun. Blood for the Blood God, I wiped 3 units, so I was able to get 3 points there. Blood Gods none of them were on an objective, so no points there. And then Pile of Skulls, I didn't want to spend my points there just yet, although going forward I will need to. So I have 0 points there. So not great for secondaries, good on primary, and obviously a lot of good damage was done, and I've tangled up quite a few important things. So we'll see if that helps. Of course, now all this other stuff is going to come in, but... and... yeah, then I spent all 7 of my Blood Tithe points, 2 on Spiteful Nullification, which basically gives me a 5-up, Feel No Pain against mortal wounds, in case he tries to smite anything. And then Savage Guidance, giving me +1 to hit on melee attacks, so that's army-wide. And that was my points and Blood Tithe points. That was my turn.
Alright, turn 2. So, Avatar of Cain moved up towards his home objective and the Forge Fiend. And that was it for movement. The Warlocks, the base shuffled over a bit. And apart from that, nothing else happened. Then all the rest of my troops came in. So 2 units of Swooping Hawk came in on the top right to get in behind his deployment zone. A Striking Scorpion also appeared there behind the wall to be able to poise to charge. Then on the bottom left, Striking Scorpions and Karandros came there as best they could. And we'll see what happens. Alright, so for the Psychic phase, the Farseer. I was originally going to use one of my Fate dice, but I decided against it, and so she cast Smite on Angron. Got an 11, Super Smite. Rolled 5 mortal wounds. My opponent saved 1 from the ability he bought with the Blood Tithe. And then Angron died and he gained 2 Blood Tithe points. After that, she casted the... what's this weird name? Fateful Divergence, which gives me a command point. So that worked. Oh yeah, I spent 1 on being able to cast the Smite. Then these Warlocks cast Enhance and Drain, or Drain on the 8-bound, the blue 8-bound unit, which would reduce their ability to hit by -1. That failed. Then they cast Smite on them, rolled a 7, did 3 mortal wounds, and 2 went through, which finished off 1 guy who had a wound. And that was the Psychic phase. Alright, so for shooting, I had the 2 units of Swooping Hawks, Mag Dump, the white Exalted 8-bound. They killed 1 and did 1 wound. Opponent rolled ridiculous numbers of 3-ups. Then my Fire Prism in melee. So I spent a Fate dice to make one of his Prism Cannons focused hit, and then he rolled a 6 to hit, so that overcame that. And then to wound, both wounded easy, and that just auto straight up killed them because it's 3d3 wounds each. And then a Shuriken Cannon fired, did nothing. After that, then up top, my Avatar of Cain fired at the Forge Fiend. It hit, and then I just used the last Fate die of Wound to make a wound. And that was it for there. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, so charge phase. So Avatar made it in. And then, made it on a 6. After that, charges. The Striking Scorpions, purple, on the bottom left, charged the 8-bound champions, the blue ones, they failed. Then Karandras charged. He failed. Then on the top right, the yellow Striking Scorpions charged the Exalted 8-bound that was on his objective. And... But they made it in after I spent a CP to re-roll it, and that was the charge phase. All right, fight phase. So, the whatchamacallit, the striking scorpion swung on the exalted 8-bound on the top right. They did a bunch of wounds, but he saved a bunch. They did some mortal wounds, so they killed one and did some wounds to another. Then my my Exarch swung, and he auto wounds. I forgot about the auto wound. But essentially, he did 5 wounds to the exalted 8-bound because of exploding 6s and all that. And then my opponent just saved them all but one. And so one guy took some damage. Oh wait, no, he saved all of them. Yeah, he rolled a ridiculous amount of 4-ups. Just all of them saved 5 4-ups. And then my Avatar of Cain swung on the Forge Fiend, and only 1 wound out of 7 attacks got through. And
the Demon Engine 5-up invuln.
Yeah, he rolled 4 5-ups, and 1 wound
Ridiculous.
got through. Yeah, it was ridiculous. So that was not expected. And then my Fire Prism swung on the 8-bound, did nothing. He swung back, didn't have the same problem. His 8-bound blue squad killed my Guardians. Then his yellow 8-bound swung on the striking Scorpions and killed them all. And that did not feel like it was my turn. That was bad combat. Alright, and that was the fight phase. Alright, points is not looking good. I really have to start focusing on it in the next 2 battle rounds. This is my second turn. The third turn's beginning, and so I really have to start focusing on all the specials and stuff like that. I got 4 points for behind enemy lines, but now I need to focus on objectives.
Alright, you guys, so for the command phase, Angron's dead, so I don't have one. But in the movement phase, basically everything moves. So my blue 8-bound moved within an inch of his Warlock Skyrunners. My red 8-bound moved close to his Farseer, about 5 inches out. My white Exalted 8-bound stayed on their objective, but they moved into the terrain to just help them not get shot by anything too crazy, as did the green 8-bound, just moved farther in. My Forge Fiend stayed in combat because he's just going to shoot at the Avatar a little bit. But the Exalted 8-bound, the yellow ones, moved towards the Avatar. I'm going to see if I can kill him. I don't know if they can, but we'll give it a go. So I have enough Blood Tithe points to bring Angron back, but I also need at least 3 points for my mission secondary. So I'm going to save my points, because even if he comes back, he actually goes into reserves. So he won't even show up on the turn that I pay the points for him. So I'm going to wait till the end to see if I want to bring him back. So that was my movement phase. Everything kind of moved and got closer to combat, or helped further secure their position on the board. Objectives on the board, there we go. And that was... Alright, you guys, so for the shooting phase, the Forge Fiend shot at the Avatar. Out of all 8 shots, only 1 hit, and it wounded. And you rolled the save?
Yeah, I rolled
Or
a
did
save.
you use
I didn't have a fate die.
Okay. And he saved it, so nothing happened there. And that was a shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so most of my army was charging. But I started with the red 8-bound because they were the farthest. They were like 5 inches. And weirdly enough, they actually failed. I rolled a 4. So I had to use a command point. I wasn't expecting to use one there. But then they got in. They rolled like a 9 or a 10 or something ridiculous. And then the blue 8-bound charged his Warlocks. They got in as well with another ridiculous roll. They didn't need it, but they got it. And then my yellow Exalted 8-bounds charged the Avatar. They rolled really low, but they were so close it didn't actually matter. And then my Lord on Juggernaut, who I almost forgot about, charged Karandras. And so I don't know if that was a good idea, but if he does not kill him, then I think Karandras will kill him.
You won't.
So, yes. And that was the charge phase. Alright, you guys, so a lot happened in this fight phase. I will start with where I started. Yes. where did I start? I started with against the Avatar.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing 4 damage to the Avatar. So each of those guys, only 1 wound went through, which is not ideal, but not the worst either. So they did 4 damage to the Avatar, and then that was it. Then I went down to the red 8-bound. They killed the Farseer. And then they consolidated into the Warlocks, which the blue squad killed, and they didn't consolidate anywhere. And then it wheeled around over to my Lord on Juggernaut, swinging on Karandris, and the Lord actually did nothing. He saved all the saves, and not a lot also went through, which was kind of sad. But the Juggernaut actually ended up doing 2 damage, so he ended up pulling all the weight there. And so he did 2 damage to Karandris, and then he started swinging back. So he split the Avatar's attacks, half on the Forge Fiend and half on the Exalted 8-bound. I just realized. So he killed the Forge Fiend pretty easy. Well, not pretty easy. It was actually only just. Forge Fiend didn't explode, and then 2 wounds went through against my Exalted 8-bound, of which he killed 1, and he did 2 wounds to the other. And then Karandris swung back on my World Eaters, on my Lord on Juggernaut, and I saved a lot of invul. I saved all of the invulns, and then it was just the 2 mortal wounds that went through. So I still had 5-ups, but I failed both of them. So they ended up having an equivalent exchange up there, or down there. And that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so I was able to get the full primaries because I'm holding almost all the objectives. He only has the Avatar and 1 objective at this point. So I got full primaries. I got 2 points on overrun because I'm holding 1 of his territory objectives. I got 3 points for Blood for the Blood God, so I killed Farseer, which was a character, and then I killed his Warlocks, which is not a character, so it's just a regular thing. So that was 3 points there. Although I killed his Fire Prism, so actually I need 2 more points. Anyway, but that was turn ago. Anyway, so Blood Gods do. The Forge Fiend was on the objective when it died, so that was a point. And then his Warlocks were on the point when they died, so that was a point. So I got 2 points in Blood Gods do, and I spent 3 Blood Tithe points to get 5 points in Pile of Skulls, and I also spent 6 to bring back Angron. And so how it works is that he has to come back into, it actually uses a different word from the rest of the book, calls it Blasphemous Reserves, which is Warp Strike in the World Eaters Codex. I don't know why I called it something different. So he's just sitting in Warp Strike waiting for my turn again, essentially. And that was my turn.
Alright, so for the movement phase, Striking Scorpions move into support, Karandras, Swooping Hawks start doing tactical stuff. 1 uses a Fate die to auto-advance 6, goes on to their back objective. Me and my opponent now, since neither of us have our home objective, we have to roll a 4 up to get our CP. I failed, he didn't. And then my other Swooping Hawks started doing their the secondary scout ahead. And and that was the movement phase. Alright, shooting phase. My Avatar of Cain shoots the guy in front of him. I use Fate die to make it auto-hit. It wounded, and he failed it. But he spent a CP to reroll his 4-up invuln save and make it. And that was it. And for the charge phase, my Striking Scorpions just piled into the World Eater, Lord on Juggernaut. Alright, so first, the Striking Scorpions swung on my opponent, the Lord on Juggernaut. The Striking Scorpion swung. I forgot to swing with the Exarch, and so he was brought down to 3 wounds, and I forgot about that. Then he chose to have his Warlord swing or his Lord on Juggernaut swing at the Striking Scorpions. They did he killed 4 of them with just his swings, but then we stopped and had the Exarch swing because of the Exarch would have killed him. Then those swings wouldn't have mattered, and I'd let my opponent swing on the Avatar next just for free. And essentially failed to kill him because he spent a CP to reroll the save. And so then the Lord on Juggernaut with his Juggernaut killed the entire squad except for the Exarch, and the Exarch has 1 wound left. After that, then my Avatar swung, and I went for mass swings because those 4-up invulnerable saves are irritating. So with 12 attacks at damage 2, AP minus 2. He killed the one guy that was there and consolidated onto another point towards the green squad, which was the nearest enemies. After that, then Karandras swung and finished the Lord on Juggernaut off and consolidated.
I won, though.
Yeah, I won. Which is ridiculous. These 4-up invulnerable saves are really irritating.
Yes, they are.
They're literally the thing that keeps your army alive. Most of them would have died already if it wasn't for that. And
That's right.
that's what's happening right now. And that is the fight phase. All right, time for a comeback on points. Behind enemy lines, got another 4. Scout the enemy is on the way for 4 points. No prisoners is slowly cooking, but I need to start gaining more points elsewhere. And not looking the best, but it's the long game now.
Alright, you guys, so movement, almost nothing happened. My blue squad of 8 bound moved towards Karandras and the Striking Scorpion Exarch. The red 8 bound just kind of consolidated onto his home objective. The green just kind of consolidated as well. The white, they can't really do much, so they just stayed. And then Angron showed back up within 9 inches of the Avatar. Now, if he fails this charge, that'll be okay because he can't reach him from there. He has to go around the terrain, and then there's dense cover, which will affect his movement and stuff. So I think he should be okay. But hopefully Angron will get the charge off and kill him. But we'll see. Anyway, and yes, that was the movement phase. Alright, you guys, so the blue 8 bound actually made it. I didn't have to use any rerolls. I needed an 8. They rolled exactly an 8 first time in, so they got in there with fighting both Karandras and the Exarch. Then Angron charged, and he needed a 9. And so he rolled it exactly a 5 and a 4, and he did get it. It took some finagling because his base size I didn't really think about, but he did get there with the 9 inches within half an inch, and so that was good. I didn't have to spend any command points, so that was cool. Alright, you guys, so in the fight phase, I started with the blue 8 bound, and so I had 2 guys swing on his Exarch because Karandras could only take 3 wounds in a turn. So they killed the Exarch. He actually rolled like 50% of the saves on the 5-up invulns, but you know, it was still one too many. And then the 3 guys up top swung, and they did the 3 damage to Karandras, and so he's still alive just because he's capped on damage. Then Angron swung, and he killed the Avatar, so he used his heavy-duty swings, and he chopped him. But then the Avatar actually exploded, doing 3 mortal wounds to Angron, but because I have the 5-up mortal wound thing, that the World Leader, the Blood Tithe point thing, I saved 2 of those actually, so he only took 1 mortal wound. And that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so I got 3 points in the primary, so the full 12 there. I got 2 points in overrun. I got 3 points in blood for the Blood God because Avatar died, he was a character, and I killed off the last Exarch, so that was 3 points. Blood Gods do, I got 1 point because the Avatar was on the objective. And then Pile the Skulls, I spent 3 Blood Tithe points to gain 5 points there. And so far, I'm actually doing really well on points. The first turn or 2 was a little kind of all over the place, but now I'm really hitting stride on points. And so yeah, so it was a pretty good turn.
All right, we decided to call it in favor of world leaders because it came to the point that there is no way it could come back. It's just the rate of attrition was completely against the Eldar, and the Swooping Hawks could not earn enough points to make up for all the primary losses. And so MVP, LVP. So for the Eldar, LVP is going to have to be the Striking Scorpions. Honestly, they probably should have not been in deep strike and been in the front. I'm really having a trouble with dealing with super hyper aggressive armies. Slightly getting better, but not better enough. And so, but when they did get to fight, they honestly would have slaughtered the 8-bound, but just the 4-up invuln saves that they have overall just really screwed me over. So they actually, if you didn't have that, they probably would perform better. So going entirely, it's not that these units are bad, it's just that in this game they perform very poorly when I needed them to do better. So the LVP is the Striking Scorpions. MVP is Tight 2. And so Avatar of Cain, it killed stuff. It killed 2 of your vehicles, killed a squad of 8-bound. Actually, well, he didn't technically kill 2 vehicles. He killed 1, but like he wounded 1, and then the D-cannons finished it off. He killed 2. He killed 1. He wounded 1 of the vehicles. Killed 1 of the vehicles. He killed 1 of your squad of 8-bound. He wounded, or he finished off another squad of 8-bound. He had a bunch of kills on the list. He was just cutting a bloody path through and surviving pretty well. And then there's the Swooping Hawks, who killed 1 guy and did a wound, but the only reason they're up on this pedestal is because they managed to, well, start scoring tons of points. They're giving me, the 2 squads are giving me 4 points each turn, and one was doing a secondary scout ahead, and that was getting me 4 points because I was behind your lines. So I was correct in my original thought that these circling around you was the good thing, but I didn't have enough to hold you back and repel you to make it really worth it. And so, as far as the true MVP, it's going to have to be the Avatar. I mean, this guy did bring me a bunch of points, but it just wasn't enough. So Avatar of Cain, I would consider my MVP. Slaughtered a lot. So what about you?
So I'll throw my LVPs. The Forge Fiend is not my LVP, but he's kind of close. Like, he didn't get a chance to do very much. Now, granted, he got face charged by the Avatar, so he didn't have the opportunity to do much. Same thing with the Mauler Fiend. He just took it to the face real hard on the first turn. But, you know, he can't really do anything about that. But overall, he probably, potential-wise, he probably did some of the least, I would say. But the real LVP is the Lord on Juggernaut, and some of it's probably how I played him, but honestly, he did nothing the whole game, and then he just took it to the face and died. So that sucked. So he's the LVP. He has some good buffs, like the movement buffs and stuff, but I don't know. I guess I didn't play him right or something, but yeah. Anyway. MVP. Now this one I'm not super sure on, but so the 8-bound, not the Exalted 8-bound, again, probably how I played them, but the regular 8-bound did work through the game. They're the ones who basically pushed up the board and took most of it, honestly. And so they were really good. But I think I'm going to have my MVP as Angron. Not only did he take that first round of shooting to the face and survived, just barely, but survived, but he was able to come back and kill the Avatar, which was really the main damage you had left, with the exception of maybe Karandris. But yeah, so I think Abaddon is the MVP. I wish I had the actual model, but whatever.
Angron, not Abaddon.
But yeah, super cool, crazy damage. And the fact that he can just kind of show up again is ridiculous.
Honestly,
maybe.
I could have played
Maybe
it a little better,
maybe
but
it's
he
a
should have
balance
died.
to him not being able to hide behind cover. I don't know.
He almost died. If I would have just spent like my fate points a bit more preemptively instead of second guessing, he would have died. He just needed 1 more wound to die from the Shuriken Cannon. Yeah, I could have auto-mated hit with the fate dice and then auto-wounded, and he probably would have died. But you had to keep rolling a lot of saves.
But I would say he's my MVP. The 8-bound were really good, and the Exalted 8-bound, I'm sure they would have done well had they actually gone into combat at any point, except against the Avatar. But yeah, no, I think the majority of my army actually did really well for itself, but I think Angron is the MVP.
Strategically useful, strategically powerful, everywhere we need to be. All right. Our overall opinions of the army. I'll go first since this is my first time playing Eldar. I hate Eldar. I hated them back then. They're a bunch of cool tricks and stuff. They can be really annoying, but these guys did not have the fighting staying power to survive. But then again, I'm facing off like the greatest melee threat in the entire game, so it's hard to judge it. Avatar was interesting and fun. The cool tricks you could do was fun. The buffs and stuff. It didn't feel like it was enough. I wasn't able to fight and hold back enough with this army. It was interesting to play. Okay, so the army was interesting to play because you really get a lot of options. You get to do a lot of silly things and really run around your opponents and stuff. I can see the appeal. I understand it. I'd have to play it a bit more to find something.
I love it. They're so cool.
Yeah, I barely essentially touched their roster. Yeah, Guardians, Swooping Hawks, and Striking Scorpions, and a Fire Prism, which did tremendous work. I do like, however, how the Eldar, their guiding fate and foreseeing the future and stuff really comes into play as gameplay mechanics, because it really went a long way. I have tons of key rerolls all the time, and they really work clutch, and I could have, if I was more experienced with them, I could have used them better. Yeah, the desire to roll dice quickly ruins strategic planning. A lot of, as far as I can say, I can see their appeal. They have they're very fluffy, and I like that the rules show it to them. But I don't know, they're not doing it for me. But they're pretty cool in what they do. And they can be annoying. They can be really annoying. Yeah. So what about you? World Eaters, an army that I actually would consider starting because you don't need that many units. It's relatively cheap.
I actually really enjoy them. I don't know if I care for this part of it, the Disciples of the Red Angel. It's pretty limiting. I really like the Corn Berserkers. I thought they were really cool, and they had that if they get shot and lose a model, auto move forward mechanic. I thought that was really cool. But it did focus in on like the 8-bound and technically demons, but I didn't want to go down that route just yet because I'm still pretty new to the book. And it requires Angron, and so I was gonna try Angron anyway because how can you not? But I enjoyed it. I actually really like the army. It seems like a really simple army, but it's actually like there's a lot that they can do and pull off, especially like the 8-bound and the Exalted 8-bound with their 5 and 4 up invulns respectively.
Yeah, this game had a huge gotcha with the 3 squads deep striking turn 1. What the crap? It's like,
oh yeah, well they all failed their charges though, except for one who killed a 5-man squad of rangers. So
yeah.
Key. Yeah, that was a really sad first turn charges. Like everything failed. But I really like them. I think there's more to mess around with and balance with. So yes, you can have an all melee army like this, just all infantry and just run across the board. But you could also probably mix it with some demons or some even just the demon engines, just a little bit of shooting to help kind of try and soften some of the big boys. But honestly, they hit like trucks.
It's
like
ridiculous.
On the charge, these 8-bound were hitting on what, strength 7 or strength 8, and then the Exalted strength like somewhere between 7 and 9. And Angron was hitting on with his full vehicle killer thing, strength 15 on the charge. Like that's ridiculous.
And he never degraded with his weapon skill at all.
Yeah.
And his attacks at the worst became 8.
Still.
Yeah, 8 times 3. That's still ridiculous.
It's like so nice.
So probably one thing I will say about this unit is because if you cut your 8-bounds, the squads, in half, they would still be as effective because like only like 2 or 3 of your guys ever needed to swing, and they'd wiped out an entire squad.
Yeah, usually it was just the champ, and they wiped out the whole group. Like that heavy chain blade, that's double the attacks. Like that's crazy. Because when you have 6 or 7 starting attacks, like it's.
Yeah, so I was thinking like you would probably want to run as many small squads as possible, because the way I was countering this army was to go behind your lines and stuff, and I probably would have needed like a few more guys to go in the background, because I didn't take this objective here because I needed 2 to be in the back line to get me 4 points a turn, and so it's like hard decisions, but
Yeah.
this just straight up the fact that only like 2 or 3 of them, maybe like a squad of 4 at most, can just obliterate almost everything, and their 4-up invuln saves is
Yeah.
ridiculous. 3 wounds each.
Yeah, the hard part when I was
toughness 5.
building it was that you only have 6 elites
Mhm.
that you can take, and so when you can only take corn demons, the demon vehicles, and the 8-bound, it's like, okay, well, my whole army is essentially 8-bound with like a few eccentric pieces and Angron. And so that did limit cap it, so you can only have so many 3-man squads. But it would be better also for Blood Tithe points to have. So I think that's where the Disciples of the Red Angel is cool, and it has some like interesting things in it. But I think the regular World Eaters Legion is probably the better choice.
Strategically for diversity of choice, but
Yeah.
I will say you get to have Angron, and apparently he is the best-selling model ever.
I believe it. He's so cool.
Yeah, he is so cool.
But
Not
even
this
in the
one.
regular one, it doesn't say you can't have Angron. The other one just says if you take the Disciples of the Red Angel, you have to have Angron. So
That's
I think you can
interesting.
have him in the regular one as well, but I don't know.
You'd have to look that up, because I do know that if Angron's in your army, he has to be the leader, and I don't know if him
Yeah.
being there forces Disciples of the Red Angel. So
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, you'd have to look that up.
I don't know. But yeah, I think he's really cool. I actually really like the World Eaters. They're weirdly fun to play. Like you literally just run forward and beat everything to death.
And the secondary game is so strong. I mean,
oh yeah, their secondaries are so easy to make.
I mean,
but
probably-
it does kind of. I think the one where you spend Blood Tithe points for points, though, I think it does kind of limit what you can actually buy with the Blood Tithe points, because you're like, okay, well, you essentially need to write off 9 points for the game to get the full on Pile of the Skulls. But you know, I had so few units, and you had so few units, that I actually didn't get a lot of Blood Tithe points.
yeah, you need to
So I
counterplay
only-
for that
last-
with more.
Last game I only bought like one thing, and then this game I bought 2 things and brought back Angron. And so it's, yeah, it could be that I just maybe need to play them differently, just take as many tiny squads as possible, like
Yeah.
the Chaos Spawn single squads and stuff like that, to try and really proc it. But I did enjoy them. I thought they were fun, and even just in the simplest sense, where you just run forward and beat stuff to death. Their secondaries are really easy to pull off because stuff just has to die. Except the one on the objectives. Both games, like that one was my least scoring, because nothing that died was on the objectives until like the tail end of this game.
Yeah, that was quite a thing. But
Yeah. But World Eaters, 100% would play again. Really enjoyed them.
all right, and then moving on from that, overall for the game, I find that I do have a problem dealing with hyper aggressive armies. If I were to redo it again, my striking scorpions would be not deep striking. Maybe one squad for tacticalness. I would have kept Karandras on the battlefield and use him to counter Angron, because he would have countered Angron. You could only do 3 wounds to him.
Yeah.
So I would have used him as another stalling tactic and stuff like that. So I wasn't able to repel your force. I expected to be able to shoot you better, but those 4-up invuln saves really came in clutch.
They did a number.
Yeah, especially with your luck, all of a sudden you can roll ridiculous amounts of 4-ups.
Finally.
Probably 3 units in reserves, 3 swooping hawk units if I could. And
yeah,
then
that's the hard part with armies, where you can have a lot of stuff in deep strike or reserves. It's like, okay, how many do I actually put? Because I did that before too. I put too many things in reserve, and then I basically lost the game by the first round. And
Yeah.
then when they did come in, it was like, well, it's pointless now.
yeah, and so like for me, like playing against hyper aggressive armor, and your army is the most hyper aggressive. Like you were making, you were all the way to here, turn 1.
Well, yeah, so Angron at full health has a 16-inch move, and the 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound have 9-inch moves base.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
My army was speedy, like they are angry.
You got pretty lucky in some ways and a bit unlucky in others. The first turn charges or first turn deep strikes is a big deal for literally boxing me in.
Yeah.
So gameplay wise, I probably would have. It's really hard to say though, because in my mind I was thinking it's whoever charges first. So I need to guarantee that my striking scorpions will show up and get the first charge on the most important targets, which is
Right.
done through deep strike. It didn't go that way.
Into that.
Yeah. So
Of course, that was also my plan with the other guys, but they didn't make the charges either.
it's really hard to say. Like, at best you could do is try to I did my best I could do. I tried to surround you, rotate you around, because you have oh so few units. You have to keep moving forward essentially. You couldn't really pivot and turn backwards, so coming from the rear is very good behind enemy lines. Very useful.
I had so few units because with the Disciples of the Red Angels, I can't even take cultists to try and just hold an objective. And so the exalted ones, for whatever reason, ended up being the ones just holding the objectives, while the regular ones were the ones that ran forward.
Yeah, and then I did my best against Angron. He survived just barely. If I had a little bit more shooting or played my fate dice just a little bit better, hey, he would have died and he would never made that charge, and I would have been doing a little bit better. My Farseer wouldn't have died. Would have died a turn later, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So, alright, GG's. Don't know what armies we're playing, but it's probably going to be our greatest hits or our favorite armies. That's not World Leaders. Yeah. Our most favorite armies moving forward? Probably. I don't know. But, alright. So, like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share it, and we'll be back for more.